Or All right, friends, I am so excited to have this guest with us today. Jonathan Grant Brown is one of my favorite humans. The first time that I had an opportunity to hear him speak was in 2006 when he was just a baby child. And he has grown into an incredible man with an incredible story. And I cannot wait for you to hear that story today. So, Jonathan, thank you for being here with us.
You, Christy. I'm super excited about it. It's cool to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, and Jonathan, you are a kind of a jack of all trades. You do a lot of things. You're a community engagement manager for an organization that we both happen to work for. And then you also have your own company called JGB Speaks, right? So we're going to hear a little bit about all of that. But I think it's super important that the listeners know that this is a podcast they want to tune into. So can you give us kind of the Cliff Notes version of your story so that people will keep listening?
Right off the jump, I think everybody has a story. And I was the kid who would be in the back of the classroom and teachers would constantly say, Jonathan, I don't know how to shut up. Get out of my class. Like my homeroom class was in the hallway. I lived in the hallway or in the principal's office. And one day I just had a brilliant teacher who called me out in the middle of one of my little, cut ups in the back of the class. And she goes, her name was Kenna Card, Miss Card. She goes, Jonathan, you don't know how to shut up. You need to go to college and major in communication so people will pay you to talk. And it changed my life. That when people talk about what's that one moment, that's one of many. But that was one of the moments that helped solidify the direction that I wanted to go in because something that a lot of people hated, which was my mouth, somebody saw it as a talent. And when I was introduced to the idea that my voice could be a talent, I leaned in full force. I never changed my major. I took every comm class I could. And since I was 18, I've been traveling around the United States sharing my story.
Oh my gosh. And you have such a powerful story, and we're going to get into that. But you had somebody just literally change the trajectory of your life. I think you had a couple people change the trajectory of your life. But you just said something that I really kind of want to dig into. And that's the fact that you took something you were good at and you turned it into a career. What allowed you to do that? Because I think a lot of us are in jobs that were like, meh, but you took your passion and made it your career. How did you do that?
One of the one of the biggest benefits of being able to lean into your talent as your career comes from people being intentional about the way they create opportunity for you and the way they mentor you through those opportunities. So every step of the way along my success career, quote unquote, as a public speaker, as a professional development trainer, there were prominent people who had influence in the community that was like, I see your talent and I'm going to create a space. I'm going to create a stage. I talk a lot about the way Patrick Briggs, one of our good friends, created a space on a stage for me. He literally gave me the speech that he was, well, not the speech, but the slot that he was supposed to do so that I can get in front of people for one of the first times. And it just opened up my career as a public speaker. There were people like Jim Nelson who, when I first spoke in 2006, where you met me, and I was an 18-year-old little brave kid, he stepped off the stage, introduced me to a bunch of principals, and told them, he straight up told them, he'll do this at your school for $500. That
I love
helped me
it.
pay my college tuition, right? That helped me buy my groceries for my dorm. I bought my first couch and my first bedroom set by driving in my little green Mazda Protege to a little elementary school, middle school, and high schools in Texas, taking those little checks and building life off of it. And so I think for me, the reason why I was able to kind of lean into my career as a speaker was one, I had this immense amount of desire to not have my voice be a negative thing. And then when people started to see me lean into that success, successful people wanted to help me get there.
Oh. Well, and here's the thing that our listeners don't know yet, but they're getting ready to, is that life didn't exactly tee you up for this. You were handed a very interesting set of cards that you had to overcome to even get to the point where you could use your voice for good and not evil. So, can you kind of tell us a little bit about your background that has landed you? I mean, your story is incredible, but I'm going to probably interrupt a couple times so that we can hear different pieces of it. Start at the beginning. Tell us how life started for little Jonathan.
I'm glad you said that because the easiest way to start this story is to start at the beginning. And when I was about five, My mom took my little brother Tiger and I to a playground park in Lampasas, Texas. Now, if you know anything about Texas, we have some country towns, and Lampasas is one of those country towns. Every year they would have this thing called the Rattlesnake Roundup, and that's literally what they would do. They would go out into the forest and woods, round up rattlesnakes, and have like a whole festival around it, right?
How do you
And I
feel about
remember
snakes? I kind of need to know. Are
I'm
you
kind of I mean, I'll hold it. I won't keep it in my house. Although my daughter is like excited about a new pet, and she's like, I kind of want a snake. No, ma'am, we
My son
won't be
had
in
a
the house.
snake actually from like sixth grade on and loved it, but I had to get real comfortable with that because that was a whole scene. So okay, so we digress. Okay, so Snakeville, USA, sort of.
Yeah, so this was a park where this festival happens that we spent a lot of time at as little ones. And one day my mom took my brother and I there. We're having a good time doing what little kids do. And the Tiger and I were the kind of kids that would always play relatively rough with one another. And so one of the things we would always do is play like battle games or war games. And so we start playing Power Rangers, which, for 90s kids, that was the thing to do. And in the middle of playing Power Rangers, I noticed that my mom is walking across the other side of the park. And so I figure it's time to go. And I grab my little brother's hand and we start booking it across the park. And by the time we get to the other side of the park, she's on the other side of the road. And you know how when you're really little, the one rule about crossing the road is when you can't cross without an adult's hand. So we stop and we're screaming and hollering, Mama. And she's like, stay there. And it wasn't unusual because we spent a lot of time together, my little brother and siblings and I. And we spent a lot of time alone without adults around because my mom had stuff that she had to do. And, we lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment in Lampasas, and we were just, single mom trying to survive, right? So it wasn't weird that we were left in that park and she was going to come back. And so we continued to play and had a good time, made friends and stuff. And after a while, obviously, some parents were like, "Hey, where's your mom? Where's your dad?" And at a really young age, we got good at coming up with stories for why such young kids were by themselves, so that people wouldn't pry too much. And my mom was a very private person, so um, we would just kind of point off into the distance and say, "Oh, she's feeding the ducks," or "She's at Winn-Dixie," which was like the grocery store across the street, and she's coming right back for a picnic. That went on for a bit, but then eventually it started to get later, and people started to go home. Um, and my brother and I, we ended up spending the next 2 nights sleeping inside of a tunnel, a concrete tunnel that they hadn't buried in the ground yet. And the first night was super fun because, we're boys and we get to stay up late and we're playing adventure games and bringing in rocks and sticks and building a fort. And we stayed up really late that first night and woke up really early the next morning. And of course, you know, parents came with their kids, early, late morning, early afternoon, and they brought snacks and drinks, and we, joined in their snacks and drinks and just kind of pretended like it was normal. But obviously, on the second day, some parents started to say, "Hey, this isn't okay. Where's your mom?" And we just kept making up stories. But by the second night, some police officers came by, and they found us hiding in the tunnel, and they put us in the cruiser and started asking us a bunch of questions. And at 5 years old, the first thing that came to my mind was we ran away from the babysitter. She's mean.
Hmm.
Now, I didn't have to like snitch on the babysitter like that, but she was kind of mean. And in
Okay.
small towns, everybody knows everybody, right? And so we didn't know how to tell him where the babysitter lived, but we knew she lived. And if anybody's familiar with Lampasas, they'll know this. She lived in a white house in front of the oak tree. And in Lampasas, there's this road that had this random oak tree growing out the side of it. And it wasn't like they decoratively built the road around it. It was like they built the road, the tree grew, and they just left it.
Oh.
And so he knew what we were talking about, and he took us and dropped us off. When we get to the babysitter's house, um, he lets us out and we go in. And of course, as we go in, he goes in, and the babysitter sees us and she sees the police and she's like, "Oh, what are you doing? Where's your mom?" Right. And we run upstairs and play with her kids. And then the conversations downstairs start to get louder and louder. And of course, more people start to show up. And that's when I knew we were in trouble because when you're really little and your parents tell you, "When I get back, you better be right here,"
Hmm.
that where had you better been, right?
Yeah,
And
right
so
there.
we knew it in our bones that, man, we left the park and mom's going to be mad. And when mom got mad, she got to wailing and hitting and busting us up. And so we were preparing for the worst. As littles, we would, to kind of avoid that explosion of our mom or her friends that came by, we would crawl into the closet and pull a bunch of clothes off the hangers and just pretend to be dirty clothes. And so we would tease each other, dirty clothes, and we would go hide. And so I'm trying to get my little brother to come into the closet, but this lady starts calling us. And she turned out to be a caseworker for CPS. And I didn't know this at the time, but she's calling me. She's like, baby, I need you to come with me. And I'm like, stranger danger,
Are
no.
you? No.
But she convinced me and she pinky promised me, you'll be gone for the weekend, only 2 days. I'll take you back to your mom on Monday. And yeah, those 2 days turned into about 12 years of my little brother and I bouncing from foster home to group home to boys home.
Jonathan, thank you for being brave enough to tell your story. You know, that everybody has a story. The cards you were dealt were not fair. And yet, even from a young age, like you found a way to play. You found a way to say, you know what, this is an adventure. Tiger, we're gonna sleep in this tunnel tonight, but it's gonna be okay. And that's, I think, the trait I've seen in you most resonate is that you look at it and you're like, we can make a game out of this. We can make this okay. Now, nothing about your story was okay until you found the right people to make it okay. And I know you've kind of given your life now to being that kind of mentor to others and to make sure that the little Jonathan and Tigers of this world end up where you did and maybe not where your brother did. And we'll go there in a little bit. But I just want to commend you. I think many times we think, oh, well, I was dealt these cards, therefore this is my future. And instead you said, no, actually, in spite of that, I'm going to go do great things. Do you think that was an internal skill that you had, or is that something that someone taught you somewhere along the way?
100%. I fought it along the way, every step of the way. People had to weather. I call it interruptions, right? Because nobody wants to be interrupted. Nobody likes it. We all have that one friend that when you're telling a story, they have a better one to tell, right? But interruptions in the sense that it's selfless. I want people to be selfless interrupters because that's what adults were in my life, and that's what really made the difference. Some adults were selfless interrupters, and what they did was they made a decision to unwaveringly continue to interrupt my life, take me off the paths that I was on, and place me along a path to success. And so, this idea of like, was that an innate thing? I think the ability to do it was something that was a part of me, right? But the learning how, the development of the skill, the practicing, and the weathering of all the storms was something that I was taught and supported by a lot of adults in my life. A very particular example of that landed in eighth grade. Well, eighth grade is the year where boys begin to become. I think it happens a little bit before that, but I was in my full-fledged stinkiness. I was in my full-fledged hyperness. I was in my full-fledged, I'm a man and I like to pick a fight with everything around the corner. And I was sitting in my regular math class at the beginning of the year. I was already on my last chance. And you know how principals, middle school principals particularly, for some reason, just like the bad kids, right? They're always attached to them. They're always finding them. They're always talking to them. And I was on my last chance. And which meant that if I got in trouble again, I was going to have to go to the alternative school.
Hmm.
And I'm going into math class. This kid's in my chair. We have a little tussle. I end up getting kicked out. And so I'm in my mindset of I'm going to the, I'm ready. I'm that little eighth
Yeah.
grade boy with all this anger and energy and frustration. And I'm walking to the principal's office thinking this is my last chance. I'm gonna go to alternative, which is ironically enough where all my friends are. But and here she comes. Amy Reynolds. She was her name is Miss Armstrong now, but I will forever know her as Miss Reynolds. She was the teacher who, for whatever reason, always knew when I got kicked out of class,
Hmm.
and she would find me in the hallway and want to have these like life conversations about potential and choice and opportunity, and I'd always try to avoid her like the plague, but she was super kind and super sweet and very like reassuring. But in this instance, she walked up to me and simply said, "Get up." And I was like, "Ooh, I've never heard that voice before."
Right.
And she proceeds to walk me down the hallway, turn the corner, and walk into her pre-AP Algebra 1 class. She pulls out a seat and very directly tells me, sit down. And I'm waiting for campus PD. I'm waiting for the principal. Like I'm still got this energy of ready to fight, right? Because I know I'm in trouble. And for some kids, once you hit that trouble indicator, there's no stop. It's like
For
I'm
sure.
going all the way until I run out of all the energy. And then down, that was me. But I sit down and she tells the class, this is Jonathan. He's going to be joining us for the rest of the year. He's already ahead of most of you, so y'all better catch up. And I'm like,
Oh,
what? No, you you can't. why are you lying, right? Like I'm freaking out, but I couldn't look dumb in front of these smart kids, right? Because this was the pre-AP Algebra 1, right? This was the class with the, the clean carpet and all the lights worked, right? It was the nice one.
Yeah, that part.
and and I I I kind of wanted to prove her right, and I definitely didn't want to get embarrassed by these kids. So I tried hard in her class. Like I paid attention. I took the notes that she wanted us to take. I came for tutorials. I went for study hall. Like I did it all, right? And you know how when teachers pass back tests, sometimes they fold them in half
Yeah.
and they like flick them at you. She's passing back this first test that we took in the what we used to call the smart kid class, right? The kids who knew they made an A would always open up their test and show everybody, right? They're real proud of it. But no one was opening up their test. And I'm like, what's going on? Like, why is they're just sticking them in their backpacks with their heads down? And I'm like, if you didn't do good, I know I didn't do good.
Yeah.
And I looked at a 68 and I got mad and I slammed it off my desk. I'm like, Miss, this is stupid. I told you I couldn't do it. Start throwing my little fit, getting ready. Cause when you're embarrassed, you control the attention as a little like me, you control the attention by exploding, right? Because now
Yeah,
I'm in
sure.
control of the situation. And she calmly came up, picked up the test, put it back on my desk, and started talking to the class about the class average was a 54, but this was a pretest. It was an assessment of what we knew so that she could structure what to teach for the year.
Hmm.
Ooh, when I heard that, I was like, "You didn't even teach us this, and I did good, right?" Like and this well of like I could do it. This well of excitement started to like grow inside me. And Miss Reynolds had this thing: being smart enough was never going to work in her class. You had to work hard in the right way with the right resources,
Oh.
and if you didn't know, you had to ask for help. She was really big on figuring out how to ask the right questions to get the right help, right? And she was like, I don't care how you cannot be smart enough, but you can work hard enough in the right way with the right resources. And when you don't know, ask for help. And it worked.
So that's a life lesson right there, right? Like if you ask for help, you can be anything. And I think many of us forget to learn that lesson, but Miss Reynolds taught you that in eighth grade and you listened. I think that's the biggest part, right? You didn't have to listen. I'm going to guess you didn't listen the very first time she said it. I'm going to guess there were a couple more in there. But if I can rewind back to the beginning of that story, you said something that I know you have turned into not just a life lesson, but something that you teach other people all the time. And that's that if you have the skills and the habits to do something, then you're ready to do it. But until you have both the skill and the habit, you can't. Can you tell us more about that? Because I know that's something that you've kind of manifested into really a training for adults. So say more about that.
Yeah. So there's two parties to this thinking. And I spend a lot of time trying to unpack these ideas with people who disagree so that we can tear it apart, right? Like, let's tear it apart. Let's figure it out. And let's see how we can maximize these tools to fit as many people as possible or to support as many people as possible. And so the camp that I'm in is no decision is everyone always wants to know, am I going to make the right decision? Is this the right decision for me to make? Right. I'm at this crossroad. I don't know which way to go, and I'm so hesitant to jump. Is this the right decision? And in my camp, I'm saying it's 100% a good decision if you have the habits that you need in order to be successful in that decision and you have the skills or the tools you need to execute. If you're not participating in the right habits and you don't have the skills or the tools, there's some steps you need to take before you fully commit to going down that road, right? And so the way I kind of convey that message with adults is one of the choices I needed to make was, when do I lean into this public speaking full time? And I had to really sit down with myself and some mentor friends of mine and call myself to the carpet, because there are some critical habits that I need in order to really lean in as a full time speaker, right? And there's some commitments that I need in order to really lean in. And so when making this decision, it's like, okay, I got to do some pre-work. I got to get these skills in place. I got to practice these habits so that when I make that jump, I 100% know that it was the right choice because I'm going to make it the right choice. Now, the other camp believes you should jump even if you don't have the skill because you can learn the skill. But You have to have the habit and the discipline to learn the skill. So that's where we're in our debate is yes, I have friends who didn't have skills. They leaned in and they jumped, but they had flawless habits. They had flawless behavior around I don't have the skill, but I'm going to pursue the skill while I'm jumping, right? And I'm going to deliver on elevating myself each time. And so we explore that in our sessions with adults to try to make the tool fit them in the best way so that they can produce the best outcome.
Oh, I love that. I love that. That is so powerful because it's practical. It fits in every situation, and it's something that would allow a leader of anything to take a minute and say, yes, this is a good idea, or no, it's not. Right. And so the podcast is called Productive Joy. I want to kind of press pause and think about something for a second. Everything you have said has been said with passion, with understanding, with a true, oomph that some people don't have about anything. And yet you have it about everything. And so I'm curious, productive joy, what does that mean to you? Like if you had to define it, what would you say is productive joy?
That is fun. That's a fun question. Um, when I feel like I'm experiencing productive joy, I think I'm leaning into my purpose. When I'm on stage and that the best feeling in the world is to finish a speech, have a kid come up, in all their emotions and go, I've never told anybody this, and then just share their story with me. That's why I started off with everybody has a story. And if I, in all of my different representations that people see when I stand on stage can express and cry and laugh and be vulnerable and a big thing for a lot of colleagues and friends of mine is take ownership of my mistakes when we can demonstrate that especially to young boys in school if they can see me demonstrate taking ownership of my mistakes. This is what I did. This is how it hurt you. This is the damage I saw that it caused, and this is what I'm willing to do to make sure that doesn't happen again. When you model those kinds of things, it gives people permission to really lean in and participate in productive joy. Then being wrong isn't negative. Being wrong is like, yo, this feels good because I'm getting better and I'm making better choices and I know I won't make that same mistake again. And so for me, productive joy is leaning into that fullness of who you are and what you want to share at that time and knowing that it's either producing positive impact for yourself or positive impact for others.
Hmm. So powerful. Thank you. And I think what I see in you is that you don't just do that, right? You don't just lean in and choose to find your purpose and produce productive joy. You evoke that in other people. You convince them that
Cool.
they can do it too. And that is a special talent not everybody has. So well done on that. I've seen it happen in rooms full of people more than once. So kudos to you on that. Now I have to tie that back to being you called it a selfless interrupter, right? So let's switch it to the business space for a second and think about if I'm a leader, I have a team of 10 people, and I am responsible for making sure that they're productive, right? And that they do their jobs. How does your theory or your idea of being a selfless interrupter work for that leader to be able to get the best out of their team?
The exceptional leaders lead with the goal of not showing how brilliant I am at doing things, but rather how they can help others unlock their brilliance.
Oh,
Right. And if you commit an exceptional leader to unlocking or helping others unlock their brilliance, that's being a selfless interrupter because sometimes you're going to have to give them pause. Sometimes you're going to have to give them direction. Sometimes you're going to have to repeat, and repeat again. But you see the potential, you understand the ability, and you're like, as a leader, I'm going to commit to unwaveringly and selflessly interrupting you because you're probably going to avoid me. You're probably going to say something not so kind with a colleague after one of our one-on-ones. But as long as I commit to doing it selflessly, you're going to start to reap the benefits of those interactions. And then you're going to go, wait a minute. When I first met you, I was this. And now I can receive more of that interruption, but I'm hungry for it because I've saw the results of me moving each time I got those interruptions. The reason I love that term interruption is naturally we like to. I do this exercise a lot. It's called empty my cup. It's so loaded. This strategy is such a beautiful strategy, both in education and in business, because sometimes, not sometimes, all the time, life happens outside of the four walls that we're supposed to be in, working or learning, and sometimes life happens hard.
Yeah.
If we don't create a space where us as learners or as employees or producers can simply empty our cups, then we won't be able to fill it with the knowledge and the tools and the resources we need to execute or to learn or to deliver on our learning. And so empty my cup is a good strategy for clearness. It's a great strategy for relational capacity. It's a phenomenal strategy. Here's the cool thing about learning, whether you're in business or you're in education, right? You're in school. Learning happens in the reflection,
Mm.
right? And the reflection, which is that third tier of the learning process, it's the delivery, the storing, and then the retrieving. We don't ever practice that. We
Mm.
don't practice that enough. And good learners or effective learners, learners who take ownership of their learning, they're good at retrieving that information, going back and thinking about it and bringing it back to the top. And so empty my cup gives people an opportunity to reflect on their experience and bring that information back to the top, right? And it helps you organize your thoughts and ideas. So it's such a loaded strategy and exercising good learning, but it creates a space for relationships to happen and for us to think about what it is that helped me get here and what do I want to do to keep moving forward.
So I have an idea.
Yeah,
Would you walk me through the empty your cup strategy so that people that are listening could go, "Oh my gosh, I need more of that in my life." Like, can you do that? Is that doable?
absolutely. But if you don't mind, I want to flip to a
Yeah.
different one first.
Yes. Okay, do it. Go.
So So the empty my cup, there's you anytime you decide a strategy, whether you're leading people at work or you're growing students in a classroom, you always want to ask yourself, what is it that I want them to learn?
Yes.
What skills do they need in order to deliver on that learning? What strategy can I use that will help them exercise those skills? Because the more practice they get on those skills, the better they're going to be able to deliver on that learning.
Okay.
So the empty my cup, I typically leverage as a tool to build relationship, a tool to establish understanding, or or a tool to simply give people a chance to empty their cup because yeah, that just happened. Yeah, a lot of firing just took place,
Yeah.
right? And we all have that on our minds. And now we're going to move into a company wide planning session where we're going to have to go into breakout sessions and think deep. But my mind is full with what's happening next. So let's just go empty our cups real quick in an appropriate and strategic way so that we can now have our cups filled. But the
So
one I
let's
want to try with, go
Yeah, I
ahead.
was gonna say, and when we do it, let's pretend that that's our scenario, right? Like we'll play it out that way because that's a pretty common one, or whatever, wherever you want to go. Go, Jonathan.
Okay.
Tell us what are we doing?
So the the organizational one that I was talking about, the one that helps you organize your thoughts and ideas. When we think about organization, a lot of times people think about it through the lens of organizing your time and organizing your physical space,
Mm.
right? When someone says you are an organized person, we always think either they're on time all the time or their desk looks phenomenal, right? It's just everything's in the right place. But being organized also means having the ability to organize thoughts and ideas.
Yeah.
And so what I ask people to do is called a three, a two, a one.
Okay.
So we're going to organize your thinking,
Okay.
but I want you to think of three high fives you would share with yourself over the past. Well, let's do the life one first. So
Yeah.
three high fives you would give to yourself at any point in time. You go back to your youngest self all the way up until today. What are 3 points in your life you would go back to your younger self and high five yourself for a job well done?
Ooh. Okay. Three high fives. Um, I found my soulmate and chose to work really hard on my marriage so that 25 years in, we're still not only in love, but actually like each other too. I would high five myself on recognizing that it's okay to push yourself out of your comfort zone. As a matter of fact, you must. And so when I was in the classroom, I never thought I'd leave the classroom. And I had an opportunity to move to the district office, and I was sitting in front of a group of kids and telling them that they should push and be the best they can be and blah, blah, blah. And I realized I had to take my own advice, and I did. And that's led me through a career I never could have dreamed of. And then the third one is going to be that I'm starting a flipping podcast. Like, what the heck? That's big. And that's scary, but I'm going to give myself a high five for putting myself out there. Those are my three.
So I'm super eager to jump into. Oh, you landed so perfectly. We didn't plan this, so this is super cool. But I'm going to share my three. I did a choir solo in elementary. It was "Oh Holy Night." My voice cracked in the middle of it, and I forgot some of the words. But when I finished, the crowd got so loud that I was ready to quit school and join Boys to Men. Like I was ready. I was gonna be a performer, right? My second one was I did a speech in high school in front of the school board
Mhm.
about Avid. And after that speech, there was a few of us who went. The district adopted Avid district wide, and I thought like for me, I was like, my city did that, and it was I told them that they should do that, and they did it. That was pretty cool. And then my third one was I took my daughter to a conference in Corpus Christi, and it was for Head Start. And there's moments in the story where people sometimes laugh too soon and or they don't laugh. And so I got to a point and some people started to laugh and Emma stands up and she goes, "You're not supposed to laugh yet." And then of course everybody laughed because they knew she was there with me. They knew she was, and so I said, "Baby, you want to come up here and tell them the rest?" And she got up and she told them the rest of the story and she made them laugh. And I was just so impressed because I didn't know that. I mean, you know your kids watch you, but like I didn't know that she had that passion for like the delivery and the
Oh,
punchline and the pause. And I was just so for me, that was a big high five. I was like, "You go, girl. You are your daddy's daughter."
that
Um,
is awesome. Okay, and we need to make sure that we explain what Avid is, because although you and I are intimately familiar
yeah,
with
yeah.
the Avid system, so Avid Center is an organization that helps students have a future by making educators better at what they do. At least that's the way I describe it. It gives people the right tools in their tool belt to be excellent, to make sure that students have what they need to be successful. Would you add anything to that?
I think from a student's lens, Avid is a place where you can go to be 100% safe to develop and grow into who you want to be. It teaches you the skills, it builds the relationships, it equips you with the right resources, and it points you again and again and again in the right direction until you decide that this is where I want to go.
It is that interrupter, isn't it?
Yeah, it literally is that interrupter. Okay, so
Okay, three high fives.
three high fives. Now, two whispers. What are two things you would go back to your younger self and whisper into your ear? They could be words of advice, words of encouragement. They could be, "Don't date that person," right? The only thing it can't be are answers to math tests or lottery numbers. Like, save on Apple, save for Apple, like invest in Apple. That's, I mean, everyone would whisper that to themselves.
What would I whisper? I think I would whisper to my younger self, embrace your extra. I am a lot, and anybody who knows me knows I'm a lot, but I, for a long time, thought that that was inappropriate or too much. And I would whisper to myself, no, actually, it's just the right amount, because that is who you were fearfully and wonderfully made to be. So I would whisper that. I think I would also whisper to let myself dream. I think sometimes I struggle with the idea of, okay, it's okay to not know what the future looks like. I'm a big fan of the book, The Gap and the Gain. And in The Gap and the Gain, it talks a lot about the fact that we live in the gap because we think that there's this specific destination that if you haven't gotten there, you can't celebrate anything yet. But when you live in the gain, you're celebrating as you go and you're recognizing, no, actually, this is pretty great. And right now, you're doing some awesome things and celebrating them as you go versus I arrived at a destination. So I think I would tell myself to let myself dream big, but to recognize the small wins along the way.
Okay, so I got that. My whispers would be to mom and daddy love them more. We haven't got to that part of the story yet, but My the people who I call mom and dad are still with me, but when I was younger, I put them through
Mm,
a lot of life, a lot of hard life, and I would tell myself that it's okay to tell them you love them because that was something I never let people know.
mm,
Because when you love someone, you run the risk of making a mistake, getting moved in foster care, and never getting to see them again.
uh,
And I hated that feeling you felt when you got ripped away from someone you loved. So I just refused to let people love me. And then my other whisper would be learn how to deal with conflict, learn how to sit in it and experience it and deal with it. Because in foster care, when conflict got too bad, the answer was, you don't have to live here. You can pack your bag and go. So when you hear that when you're 5 and 6 and 7 and 11 and 12, you get really used to making big mistakes and then packing your whole life into a little blue duffel bag, sitting on the front porch until your caseworker comes, and then moving to a new place where you can pretend that you aren't that kid, you didn't make those mistakes. And that manifests as an adult, very difficult with dealing with relationships, right? Because
yeah.
in my relationship, it was very easy for me to just grab my keys, jump in my truck, and leave, which causes a lot of trauma.
Yeah.
It causes a lot of trauma. So I would
Well,
whisper to myself, learn how to deal with conflict, lean into it and figure it out.
and Jonathan, I wish we had like 6 hours, but I may have to bring you back because you do a lot of trauma informed things, right? Trauma informed parenting, trauma informed foster care, trauma informed. And I think that would be a whole podcast by itself that we could
Yeah.
most certainly do. So we're going to plant that seed for later that people might want to hear it.
Sounds great. Thank you. So now we're on our last one. What's one thing you absolutely will accomplish in your future? It's not the only thing you're going to do, but this is one thing you for sure when you're off into the next life and people think about who you were and what you did, this is the legacy you left behind.
Gosh.
I know that's a big one.
That's a big one because I could go in a lot of different directions. But since we are here in this space and I am trying to put myself out there, I am going to be a name that people associate with finding your best self and being your best self and doing so in whatever environment you're planted in.
Mine is I want to be known as a phenomenal father and an awesome husband.
Yeah.
I think all of the work that I do is to get good in those two areas. I want to be the best dad in the world. And to me, that means becoming a great educator, right? That means becoming a selfless interrupter, right? I want to be a phenomenal husband one day. I want to, I want all my buddies' wives and all their, fans and family to be like, yo, your husband yo, he's doing it. He is doing it. All right. Cause yeah, that's what I want my legacy to be. So now we unpack the 3, 2, 1. So exceptional leaders in their practice, if they adopt this on a regular basis, they're going to see a significant transformation in the way people take ownership and become productive in the work that they do and the lives that they live, right? The 3 high 5s are essential because we talked about learning happens in the reflection. When you go back and you retrieve that information, when was the last time you really sat down and thought about what are 3 high 5s I would give to myself? If it wasn't in like a formal review of your work, you didn't really get to authentically say, I'm proud of that choir solo, or I'm proud of putting in work in my marriage so that I could have this beautiful life 25 years later with my partner, right? And so the high 5s are essential because that's what shows you what you do well and who you want to become. And check this out. You said, put in work in my marriage so that I can have a beautiful relationship. Push out of my comfort zone. So you must. You got a high 5 for pushing out of your comfort zone and then starting your podcast. All of these high 5s led into who you are today, right? You're someone who shows people how to put in work and how to navigate difficult situations so that you can have the happily, ever after. You're someone who pushes past comfort zones and teaches others how to push past comfort zones. And it led you to something that might have been very uncomfortable, which is like, I don't know nothing about it, but I'm going to lean into and learn the skills and have the habits to start a podcast, right? So your high 5s help influence who you're going to become. When you're talking to students, it's brilliant because the things they do well are going to lead them into who they want to become. Choir solo, speech in front of the school board, right? And then what was my last high 5? I forgot my own last high 5, but it was choir solo, speech in front of the school board, And then
Now I'm thinking of your whispers that I
yeah, I
love.
don't even think I shared it, but my Avid speech, which launched
Oh
my
yes,
public
yeah,
speaking
yeah.
career, right? It launched my public speaking career. So all these things on stage led into who I was eventually going to become, right? Now the whispers are important because when we reflect and we think about our whispers, it reminds us of how will we deal with something differently, how will we navigate something more importantly, and whispers are like advice. It's always the most valuable the day after you didn't listen to it, right?
Yeah, for
But
sure.
if you get good at reflecting on your whispers, you're gonna get and listening to them, you're gonna get good at taking that advice the day before you needed it.
Yeah.
And that's where you start to see results. And then the final one, the one thing I want to accomplish, you have to keep exceptional leaders keep their minds fixated on the future with this one thing. Is what I'm doing today contributing to who I want to become tomorrow?
Love
If
it.
not, then I got to make a shift.
Oh my gosh, so powerful, Jonathan. Thank you for walking us through that. And you know what we're going to do? We're going to leave people on a cliffhanger because that's just how I'm going to roll. We're not going to do Empty My Cup, but we're going to talk about where they can find you so that they can learn about Empty My Cup that goes along with the processes that we've been doing. Because here's the thing, you are a wealth of knowledge, the kind of knowledge that people need in their lives because you've walked it, you've lived it, you've experienced it, and you decided to make it better and figure out what systems needed to be in place for you to be able to excel. And that to me is productive joy. That to me is exactly what you were designed to do.
So cool. Well, thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can find me at jgbspeaks@gmail.com. You can also find me on X at jgbspeaks. You can find me on Instagram. This one's a unique one. So everyone in college called me Ziggy. So Zigster, Ziggster 06. If you want to see some photos of me and my little and the life that we live, they'll be there on Instagram. And then you can, of course, find me on Facebook at Jonathan Grant Brown. Yeah,
Well, we will put all of that into the show notes. But before we go, I've got three rapid fire questions for you. Okay.
let's
So,
do it.
three things that I want you to answer as best you can. Are you ready for them?
Ready? Yes, ma'am.
What's your definition of fun?
Get up, get out, and get something.
I love it. Okay. How do you channel your best self on your worst day?
Look in the mirror. Ooh,
Oh,
ooh, yes. When I'm mad, and my daughter knows this too. When I'm mad or angry or something, she stands in front of a mirror so I can see myself. And if
oh,
I can see how I'm acting, boy, that's a quick way to get me corrected.
oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
oh. You've got a
She
very
actually
wise
learned
little girl.
she learned it at school. And it was something about conflict resolution. They do the restorative justice circles. And they get them to stand in front of mirrors so they can see themselves when they're talking to the person they had conflict with. And they're like, when you can see yourself be ugly, boy, you correct it quickly. And so she was telling me, we should do that. We should do that. And so now she'll try to get me in front of a mirror when I'm getting after
You're
her.
like, child, I don't think that's a good plan.
Yeah. And she's like, look at yourself, Dad. I'm like, I know, baby. Give me a minute because I need to calm down.
I am going to totally tell my daughter who teaches kindergarten that she needs to do that. She just recently had a full blown meltdown kid, like just lost it. And I think if he had been looking at himself, he might have handled himself a little differently.
Yeah.
And he's 5.
Delicate line there. We don't want to turn it into I think a lot of times in school we try to use tools that end up being like shaming
Oh,
tools, right?
yeah, for
We don't
sure.
want it to be like a shaming thing. But if you just had a mirror and
Yeah.
you had conversations in front of that mirror, they'll see themselves.
Well, and I
And
think
they'll be like,
what the reason that came to mind is because in this particular case, this sweet young man very much recognizes when he is ugly, acting ugly, when it's after the fact, but in the middle of it, he struggles to see it.
"Ooh,
So
that's good.
I think
That's good.
that's why he came to mind.
That's
It
cool.
is, yeah, I think for him. Okay, so last rapid fire question. Are you ready?
It's me.
What do you want people to remember about the last 30 minutes of this podcast?
That I want people to remember that being a selfless interrupter is twofold. You have to allow yourself to be interrupted selflessly, right? Whether you're a little or you're a grown adult in your life, like be open to being interrupted selflessly, and then commit to interrupting others selflessly for no benefit of your own, only for the benefit of them. And I think we'll be in a much happier, healthier, more productive space in life.
Ugh, I love that. Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for being a guest on Productive Joy. We could not have learned all of those things from anybody else. So thank you,
It was
thank
a
you.
lot of fun. I really appreciate it. So much fun. Thank you.
Good. And for the listeners, friends, thank you. And until next time, go ahead and turn fun into action.
Woohoo.
Woo, woo, woo.